Hello, and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kathy Watson of the 144th District in Bucks County. As our country continues to go through very difficult economic times, more and more people struggle to save for the important events in their lives. On today's program, I hope that we can provide some advice on how saving for college, saving for retirement, and changes in our tax laws, what can we do? Joining me today to tell us what we can do is Mark Zinman, and he's here representing the Pennsylvania Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Mark, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. As I've mentioned, I think this is such a tough time for all of us. I'm past saving for the college. We're paying it off. We're past that part. But there are those saving for retirement. People are struggling. Some certainly we know are unemployed. But for those who are still employed, how do we manage? How do we get through? And I know the temptation is to just say, I can't do any of this anymore. And then the future will look even grimmer. So how are we going to do this? And I guess we ought to start with that saving for college. We have folks in the office talking about that all the time. And what can they do?
It's not only in your office, it's every day in my office as well. It seems to be a very popular topic, and I think it starts at the time of birth. For most parents is that they already are worried about what to do, what their obligations are. So what I advise my clients, the first thing you need to do is determine what your own philosophy is. Are you going to pay for college? Are you, there are certain parents that think that they should pay for undergraduate school. There are parents out there that think they should pay for undergraduate and graduate. And there's some parents out there who feel that children should participate in the cost of their education. So you first need to determine what your position is on how you want to take care of your children's educations.
Very important. I never thought of that when we were doing it. Go ahead.
Next, now you said you're past. I'm partially past. I have 3 children. My eldest daughter graduated 2 years ago. I have a son who's a senior in college, and a daughter who's a sophomore in college. And it is absolutely something you have to plan for. And I know that we started saving for this, my wife and I, going back 20 years. And there's no way of predicting that far in advance what college costs are going to be, what kind of education requirements your child might have, and where they may want to go. So as far as deciding on how to do that, the best you can do is try and I preach to my clients I call it a cubbyhole mentality of financial. Think of how we were in kindergarten and we would go in and we'd put our school bag in one cubbyhole and we'd put our coat in another cubbyhole. Well, nobody can fill everything. I don't have any clients, and you hopefully don't have not many constituents who can meet all their financial obligations continuously. So therefore you have to do what you can do, and you have to try and put something away for each segment of your life based upon, again, what your goals are and again, what you can afford to do.
Interesting. So your point is using your cubbyhole, but I'm putting at least a little something in each one of what I've determined to do.
Absolutely.
Not, which we hear people doing, I get panic stricken, and we'll get to it, but forget the retirement. I have to deal with now, and we have to get him through school and pay for this, or get her through school and pay for that. So that's not what you're telling me. You're telling me that whatever it is, put a little bit in each of those cubby holes.
Right. One of the questions we ask our clients is what keeps you awake at night, and I think education and retirement are 2 things that keep all people awake at night. So the best way to combat that is to at least try to do what you can in each segment. It's different when somebody has an infant versus having somebody who's in college versus somebody who has somebody who may be finishing school, because all those people, depending on what they have done so far, changes the answer of what's available to me.
Okay. Any other creative ways how do we bulk up that college savings, especially in these times? In other words, I think you begin to panic as your child gets to middle school too, and you see perhaps college looming, and the news always tells you that it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars for this little baby born today, and it's very daunting. It's very daunting because none of us make that kind of money where it's so easy to just lop off parts of income.
Right, and I think one of the other problems is that a lot of parents have no idea where financial assistance might come into the equation. And it's very difficult because that's unpredictable. It's based upon, is there academic qualifications? Is there athletic qualifications? Is there a school that, different schools might have different financial packages depending on their own needs. So you can't really predict that either. And as far as college savings is concerned, there's several choices. The most common one that people hear about is the 529. And the 529 refers to the IRS code section that allows the contribution, similar to a 401k.
Right.
529 in Pennsylvania, there's two. You hear about the Pennsylvania TAP program, which is a program where you can buy credits at state institutions. You can choose your institution and buy credits, and those credits will increase with the inflation of, so if you bought Penn State 20 years ago, one credit, you still have one credit at Penn State now.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's the 529s that are partner each state and it partners with maybe a different fund family. And you can put money into 529s, and you have usually a wide range of mutual fund choices.
Okay. So there are things then to do as you're moving along and constantly. And I guess when you're in something like that too, I suppose that really forces you to keep something in each cubbyhole.
Right. We tell clients that you have to consider savings to be a monthly expense. The same way your mortgages, your food, your insurance, etc. So if you have a regular amount that you contribute to each of these cubbyholes, that makes it a lot easier. And then when there is maybe a little extra, you can add to what you think is the best for the family. The other thing to keep in mind is, and a lot of people know, Pennsylvania offers a deduction from state income tax for contributions to a qualified 529 plan. And I believe it's $13,000 per parent, or $26,000 if both parents contribute equally and at least make $13,000 a year.
Right.
So in Pennsylvania, you can get a 3.07% rate of return on every dollar you put in, which is a lot better than you're going to get in a lot of investments today.
And interesting. Yes, it is. That's better than most of when they talk about your savings account or your this or your CD. Yes, it is.
Correct.
Tax credits then. Anything else or a savings plan that we could be looking for? I'm certainly familiar with, if we get that far along, when you've got a child, as you said, you have two, in state in Pennsylvania, we look to FIA, our higher education program, for grants and for loans, and how do you qualify? And of course that's for colleges that are in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
What is the FAFSA that people fill out too?
Yes.
That is usually what people...
Explain what that is, because people go, FIA, FAFSA, they have no idea.
FAFSA is accepted by almost all the schools. It's and most of the schools, you do it in conjunction with the school your child is either attending or applying to and attending. And you would fill out the form. It's usually available in January, and it includes information on the parents' taxes and assets, and it includes information on the students' taxes and assets.
And I always say to people, this is essentially, it is your federal, but your financial application. And it's like doing it once so that you've put together, which is always a hard thing for parents to do, because it's just as bad as tax time when you're pulling out your hair. But it is to pull it together, have it all there, and then you can use it school to school to school, whatever that young person, whatever school they're
Correct.
applying to.
You fill it out once and it applies to every school. The difficulty that people do have is that they usually want to fill it out in January, and sometimes it's hard to get all your tax information in time. So you have an opportunity to do it as an estimated and then have to go back and do a final. So, which
also becomes important for people that do have, and we've heard people who didn't qualify for Johnny when he was a freshman for some kind of extra help. But indeed, sadly, Dad, in this economic time, lost his job or whatever. They need to go back and amend forms and do that, because then they may indeed qualify.
Everything financial aid relating goes off of that form. Even loans, the Stafford loans, the Parent Plus loans, we can talk about those separately, but all those things come off of that form.
Okay, since you said talk about it separately, let's do that for parents that are in the midst of this. And I think the first time, especially for the first child going to college, and perhaps you're a parent who didn't go, and even if you did, things have changed a whole lot. And you look at all of this and you go, I have no idea what I'm doing here. How do we do this? Help us to know for that parent. How do they approach it? What is Stafford? What are all some of these terms?
Well, first of all, I would say that use the guidance counselors at schools. They do this all the time. They are there to help your student get into school, and they can help walk you through that. Certainly, myself, like a tax professional, I help my clients know where to get the numbers from, because the application says pick out line 67. Line 67 of what? So you have to walk your clients through that part of it. But the schools help a lot too. And you thought if you're, we're going to go by the premise that you have a first-time student going in. So you've made your application to whatever number of your target schools are. You filled out your FAFSA, which is you do online. You do it in conjunction with the schools. You can always Google FAFSA. Then you will get your acceptance from your schools. Sometimes the acceptance comes first and the financial aid comes later, but usually you'll have your acceptance and your financial aid package in place before the acceptance date for that school, which is, a lot of schools are April 1st or May 1st. Don't be shy about asking the school for more, especially if that's the school your child's interested in. They make financial packages, but certainly schools have maybe thousands of applications, but only several thousand of freshmen. So as people drop off, there may be more available to the students that really want to go there.
Very important too, and I think people don't realize that, and I didn't myself, that I just thought, I guess I was the Oliver Twist going, more please sir, but it never occurred to me that you actually could ask for more. And say, look how this goes, and negotiate. And I know students they just want in at that school for whatever reason, so they don't want you to do anything to rock the boat. And I'm well aware that many of our private institutions have, through a variety of scholarships and grants, more money in effect to either lend or to actually give to a student to bring that student to their school.
Well, you hear about this all the time, and there's thousands of unclaimed scholarships out there. And I think it is worthwhile for your student to maybe work through school, maybe the profession, maybe an alumni association. If you went to a certain school, there is plenty of money out there. You have to work at it. You also have to talk to your child. There's work study available for the child, perhaps. There is the student loans. They're less in early years. The Stafford loan, it's either $3,000, I believe, a year. And then there's the Parent Plus loan. And the difference between a Parent Plus loan and Stafford is that loan is again done through the financial aid of the school, but it's really an unsecured loan that's guaranteed partially by the federal government and allows you to have your child go to school. So there is plenty of options out there for parents to get their child into school of their choice.
And I suppose finally on that we should say, and you start early. You've told us we start back in, I'll use your analogy, so good, but kindergarten with that. But really, I guess early on, whenever we decide to have children, that we're putting some money away, whatever little bit that we can. And even for a child then going on to higher education of some form, starting sooner to investigate and understand what your resources are, what they probably will be in 2 or 3 years, and where you might go for help or money, seems to be the best way to go about it.
I don't want to turn off any of your constituents who may have a 15 or 16-year-old child who haven't done it. It's never too late, but on the other hand, it's never too early. Okay. Never too early.
Well, let's take a quick break. Legislative report will return in a moment, and then we'll move on from the college phase, more towards my phase, towards the retirement phase. We'll talk about saving for retirement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that Fort Indiantown Gap, located in Lebanon County, is home to Pennsylvania's only Veterans Memorial? C.J. Frederick of Westchester, Bucks County, submitted the winning design that now honors those men and women who have sacrificed their lives in defending this great country. Dedicated to the Commonwealth on October 7, 2001, the Veterans Memorial is surrounded by freestanding walls and houses an amphitheater, which can accommodate large crowds during an event. Strategically placed in the front of the amphitheater is a tomb that reminds visitors of those who gave their lives protecting the freedoms of this nation. The design suggests a war-damaged structure in which Frederick wanted to impress upon those visiting the horrific arena of war. Now you know.
Did you know that the state capitol is not only the epicenter of the Commonwealth's governing bodies, but was once home to 390 preserved Civil War flags? During the war, it was customary for each state to furnish their regiments in battle with flags representing their contribution to the Union Army. After the war, Pennsylvania's military department was responsible for collecting the flags, and in 1872 they were reverently housed in the Capitol. Following the completion of construction on the new Capitol building in 1914, the Civil War flags were removed to the Capitol Rotunda. They were kept untouched in custom-made flag cases until 1982, when the Capitol Preservation Committee initiated its Save the Flags project. Throughout the years, dust and long-term vertical display of the flags had begun to devastate the brittle silk fabric and painted designs. The flags were removed by local textile conservators and were repaired and preserved in storage units that protect the relics from light, dust, and excessive handling. Now you know.
Welcome back to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kathy Watson. My guest today is Mark Zinman, CPA. We've been discussing saving for college, and now we're going to move into that next phase of life, one getting closer for me, and that, of course, is saving for retirement. And Mark, I was saying to you even in the break, what I see are people who've given up saving for retirement because it's true, in these bad economic times, they're saying, I don't have enough money. I just have to worry about getting the kids through college or, getting me to that point, and I just can't worry about retirement. And yet, they're maybe within, 20 years possibly of retiring or less in many cases if they've been older when they've had their children. And then I have the group that I also see in my office who are folks who have absolutely done their best, worked very hard, following your cubbyhole, we're in that analogy, and they did put that money away for retirement. But living longer and seeing our economy, the costs spike so, be it healthcare, food, everything, they're panic-stricken that they won't have enough and that they're really cutting back in things they don't have enough. And yet they did everything that if we'd been alive in those days to tell them, and doing this TV show, they would have been people, yep, we did everything you told us. Let's talk about those two groups, but first let's do the group that's going, I just have to get these kids through college and I don't have money to save for retirement. What do we do for them? And then we have the group that's doing that and said, and wow, look at my portfolio, it took a terrible hit.
Well, we talked about earlier about saving for retirement, and if the choice is between saving for retirement or saving for your child's education, and that's the only choice you have, and I know it's going to sound counterintuitive, but saving for retirement is more important. And the reason for that is that there are opportunities to fund college education. There's opportunities to fund the college education through Parent PLUS loans, Stafford loans, grants, work study, all the things that we've already mentioned. Nobody can go out and finance their retirement. So if you're given that limited choice, and like we discussed, most people in order to sleep well at night would probably try and do a little bit of both. You should fund your retirement first and your college education second. But also in these economic times, you cannot give up on your retirement. I mentioned earlier in the first segment about that I started saving for my daughter when she was first born. Well, you can't start saving for retirement too early either. And I've done this for 30-some years, and I've never had a client walk into my office and saying, I got a problem, I got way too much money for retirement, what do I do? It's never happened.
Yeah,
Right.
Okay. Which gets to a point. Even if they've been saving and they thought, they were doing a good thing, and they really scrimped during bad times and tried to do this, those investment portfolios took a terrible hit, and I certainly know that. My husband's line is usually upstairs in the little office and come down and going, Kathy, do you know what happened to that 401k that we were trying to do? Because his company doesn't have it, and we have to do it ourselves. And he goes, well, just so you know, we can't get this back before we die. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't really know an answer to that one. We can't. But the very serious side of that, that's very scary, looking forward and thinking you did try, and through other forces, economic forces, you may not have enough. What do we do?
Well, the problem with that is some of that's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, because people tend to remember when their 401k goes down. They don't tend to remember when the value goes up. I did see a recent study that said that, people, even in the last 8 or 10 years, when the market seems to be so much more volatile, still had 8 to 10% rates of returns, because maybe the stock market didn't appreciate, but a lot of stocks pay dividends. So there's still getting that capture. And plus, quite frankly, there is no other market to put your money in where you have the opportunity to get that kind of return. I mean, you could buy a CD, you could put money in a money market, but you're going to get 0.25%.
Right.
You're going to do much better long term in the market. And unfortunately, your constituents, my clients, our friends, are small little fish in the big pond. And so they all hear the news, the economic news. You just have to come up with a good financial plan and stick with it through good times and bad.
That brings up a point then. How aggressive, because we are the little fish, and you picture being eaten in this big ocean by the sharks. But how aggressive do we get when we're investing for retirement? And it changes, doesn't it, in terms of when I'm a little bit younger and investing versus as I'm moving closer towards retirement age, what I'm to do?
Well, the closer you get, investment is always discussed in time horizon, okay? So the more time you have, the more risk you can take, because you have more time to make it up. So certainly, the closer you get to retirement, the less you can be involved in what's going on, that, Greece is having a bad day, London's having a bad day.
The volatility is dangerous.
The market is very emotional, and so are people. But in long term, it's not emotional. It's based on the income of the companies. So I can't stress enough that you need somebody, whether it be an accountant, a friend, an investment advisor, somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, who can help you come up with a plan. And that's the plan you have to stick with. And there is a risk reward. The more you risk, the more reward you can get, but the more you risk, the more you can lose. So that's why people buy CDs. They know they're going to get 1 or 2%. They're not going to get any less, but I can't tell you today what a certain stock or group of stocks is going to do 6 months, a year from now.
Okay. Now, we talked about tax credits with college tuitions and investment. What about tax credits for retirement planning?
Well, lower income people, there is a retirement credit available. I believe it phases out pretty low, like below $50,000, but there is a credit. But on the other hand, a lot of people's retirement plans, the employer will match something. It could be 1%, 2%, 3%, and if you don't take advantage of that, you could be doubling your money. So if you put 3% in an employer's plan and they're matching 3%, you just doubled your money.
Okay. Are there any other new credits or anything I know we've had changes in tax law too, and I think that's hard to keep up with, and I know that we get a notice that, now's the time to start looking at that 401k, and shifting is how much it's always a pie. And the pie shouldn't be here, but it should be over here. Again, for what I'll call more traditional investment, less risk involved. Any credits, anything new for those of us trying to save for retirement?
Well, there's a lot of things that are proposed, unfortunately, right now. Not a lot has been passed in our Congress. I think that retirement has changed for people. I don't know that we can depend on Social Security as much, both as in durability and in the percentage of what it takes. Also, a lot of people nowadays are never retiring. They're just changing their lifestyle. That changes how much people need in retirement planning.
May I ask, when you say
Sure.
that, you're saying some people aren't what I call the old way of retirement, that they absolutely they were both sitting home and looking at one another, if it was a couple. But what you're saying is they scale back and then they still do some work and then live off some retirement?
That seems to be the plan for most Americans. A, because they're living longer. B, because people don't want to sit at home and do nothing. And I think that the old thought of, like, I work on Friday and Monday I have nothing to do is not happening anymore. And people tend to follow their hobbies or pursuits and use that to enjoy their retirement. Mm-hmm. And it also takes some of the financial burden off of the retirement, which means that you don't have to, there's no magic number of how much you have to save for retirement to retire. People come to me all the time and say, I need to plan for retirement. I say, okay, let's start with the easy question. When are you planning on dying? Because if you could tell me that, I could work my way backwards. So there is no easy answer to that question. and it's more an answer of comfort and lifestyle.
Okay. Where can our viewers, in talking to you and understanding this then, where can our viewers go for more resources? We talked about in the first half of our show when we were talking about college, and we talked about the fact that talk to your guidance, the student's guidance counselor, and look online and things you can do. Talk to us about all these resources.
I'm
And a good friend who's a CPA who you go, hey, can I just ask you a couple questions? I'm sure you're a hit at parties, especially now when you say what you do.
Grateful, very, very.
I suspect
very,
so.
If I can get out to a party.
There you go.
I'm here also representing the Pennsylvania Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and they do a wonderful job of putting up. They have websites, savings. They're very into financial literacy. It's a great resource. It's www.picpa.org. They will have a great number of resources there, either helping you find an accountant in your area or different questions and information on saving, college information, retirement information.
Okay, so that would be a great start
Great resource.
for everyone to go to then to see. And I think that's it, that sometimes we just don't see this as much like going to school and taking a course, but it is a course. And we've often said that in our schools, we often don't do the practical side. We learn
Lifelong
French and we
learning.
learn this, but we need to constantly keep reinforcing the living that we're doing and how to do it and do it as successfully as we can in what really is very difficult economic times.
I would agree. It's challenging and it's a lifelong of learning.
I thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Kathy Watson. If you need assistance with any state matter, feel free to contact me at either of my 2 district offices or through my website. The information will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching. Thanks to our guest for coming and talking to us. And please join me next time for another edition of Legislative Report.